And so the story goes, somebody is living their life. They have this self-destructive nature that happens to surface at some point. They start to develop bad habits that turn into more bad habits that start crumbling everything around them. Their entire world ends up crumbling at some point in time. This leads to people reaching out for counseling. And a lot of times we find ourselves in rehab. And what I've noticed in talking to hundreds of people at this point is you go through the rehab process, you feel so good for so long, you come home, you get back to work, you have these great relationships, you even found new hobbies sometimes. And after so long, you start to revert back and reaching towards old familiar habits that aren't so productive, that are outside of the guidelines of what you learned in rehab or in counseling. And one by one by one, they start adding up. And then next thing you know, we hit what we call relapse. So that's where we're at now is, why does that happen for some people and not for others? Why do we eventually start reaching back to those old habits, even though we know they're so destructive, even though we know they have the potential to tear everything down that we built back up again? Ryan, what happens?
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the question, right? So, in my humble opinion, I think what we are is essentially we are a set of programs. Are you familiar with Mark Passio's work at all?
A little bit, but if you can just expand on that for somebody who isn't.
Yeah. So he coins this phrase that, humans are not necessarily inherently evil, nor are they inherently angelic. They are inherently programmable. And so I believe what we are is essentially we are a set of programs. And so how we're operating from is essentially updated software, or we're using outdated software. And so a lot of these programs that we're running on have been implemented during those formidable years between 0 and 7. And so though those programs worked for us when we're a child, when we're coming from an adult, they don't necessarily are acting in our best interest when we're behaving in ways that are not going after necessarily our dreams or aspirations and our goals. And so what I do is I work primarily through the subconscious. And so the subconscious mind is essentially, it's your protector. It's your bodyguard. It's essentially like like a 500-pound gorilla that sits on your left shoulder, and it surveys and it looks for patterns and repetitions in order to mimic that environment. And who we are is essentially also, we're pack animals. And so we want to go along to get along, and we can see a lot of that, what transpired the last 4 years. We can see how we're being kind of manipulated through our mind.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah. So, um,
Is that for everybody?
yeah, I mean, I would say so. Yes, absolutely. And so what we can do is we can start to upgrade, though, that software that we're running. And we can do that by, a plethora of different scenarios by, I guess, first understanding maybe, you mentioned identity. We can look at maybe who we are and some of those self-sabotaging, self-limiting beliefs. And I think in order to figure out who we are, we need to first determine who we're not. And so who we're not is, we're not the passport book, or the picture ID on our driver's license, or the all caps name, the ens legis that the IRS wants us to, I guess, be responsible for. So we're not that.
Mhm.
Um, we're also not the story that we're telling ourselves to ourselves about ourselves. So, and that, that can be challenging, right? When we're coming from that place of where we just have this story on loop. It's like a marathon, it's like a feedback loop of informing the ego, the identity, and then our own self-limiting and self-sabotaging behavior. It's just kind of informing the one and the other. And and words are really important, right? Words are they cast spells. They, with our words, what we think of, we think that we use words to describe our experience. They describe our environment, but words are really actually they're creative. They create our reality. And so I think it's really important to understand the words that we're choosing to use, because then they will cast the spells that will dictate the story that we have. And so if we can determine that, and also understand that, whether it would be trauma, whether that be like an event, or whether that be some sort of hurt or pain, that story, rather that event happened, it occurred, it's valid, it's true. But the story is what we made it mean about us. And so if we're not careful, we can replay that event over and over and over again. And so you can see somatic work where they use, Peter Levine discusses this, where you look at nature, you look at a gazelle being chased by, a cheetah, and it escapes and it does this shake, right? It literally like rids itself of all of that trauma. Whereas humans, we we tend to carry all that junk with us, and we replay it. And so, I think so. How to maybe, offering some solutions is, what we can do is we can literally write it down. When we convey the story on paper, it creates some distance between ourselves and the story. So instead of being the constant participator in the story, we can look at it as almost like the observer. We can observe the story on loop. We can kind of identify like, that's an interesting word choice, or that's something that to look at. And as Mark England talks about it, he discusses this concept that, that words influence our lives, and they influence our imagination, our thoughts, and our emotions, our posture, how we're carrying ourselves, and our breath, how we're breathing. And through my experience, I definitely have a background in acting, and I can say that, I've worked myself up into a state, and I think that's what we
Mhm.
do in life, is that we tell ourselves that inner monologue that is either dictating, certain outcomes. It can either be helpful for us to achieve our goals, or it can't. And so why do people, I guess I'll just stop there. And
So my question, you said words form how we respond, but where do the feelings fit in there? Because for somebody who is in the throes of a dangerous addiction, for instance, words are very powerful, but don't their feelings at some point trump that? Like you also mentioned the somatic experience, which is releasing through the body, like the physical body, all of that pent up chaotic energy and shaking it off like a dog would if it was being chased. So where do the feelings come into play here? Because for somebody who is going through some kind of trauma, and and if they're home from rehab and they're fighting this urge to go back to this addiction or this addictive substance that made them feel better or feel nothing, because the feeling was too much and they don't know how to shake it off. They're looking for that numbing mechanism. So where does the feeling fall into place, and how does that affect somebody in their recovery?
Mhm. Well, first I would just acknowledge them. I would listen. I would tell them that's okay, like that there's no good or bad feelings, there's no good or bad emotions. It's just information,
Mhm.
and that they're okay to feel whatever that is. And then again, I think I would also revert back to the words, the stories, the feelings are informing the words are informing the feelings are then reinforcing the words. And so if we can again, detach, put it down on paper, to see where that is stemming from. But when it comes to um I think the feelings of wanting to go back, it's this idea that I think it's okay to have those feelings. I think it's okay to not necessarily be shamed or guilted into how we perceive ourselves or what we should be doing. You know, I don't know if I'm answering that question or not, but like I think that, we can play this game of like the should game, right? We can again, should infers there's sort of this idea of this obligation and pressure to do something. And so if we can just replace that word with could, there creates some possibility. It's not necessarily, you know, enforced with obligation and pressure to do something. I should go to the gym. Well, I could go to the gym, and then you can add another one, replace that with can. I can do that. And then eventually, well, I will do that. Um,
So what's the
and
difference between somebody who comes back from some kind of retreat or a rehabilitation program, and they're good, they're golden, they're on their golden path through life and everything is held together like glue? What's the difference between that person and then somebody who comes back and 10 months after treatment, they they take that phone call from a person that is just doesn't have healthy relationship with, and they just fall back into that negative behavioral trap? What's the difference between those two people? Did the one who stuck on their path for the rest of their life and was clean and sober, did they get rid of their limiting beliefs, and the one who relapsed didn't?
it could be
Okay.
that I'm not evading the question, but I think there would be more that we'd have to unpack. But yeah, I mean, I think there's like the ego is tied in there as well, right? And so the ego wants familiarity. It wants nothing more than to confirm its own opinion of itself. And so if we're again coming back to some story work, if we're telling ourselves that we are not enough in order to create that sobriety, or that we don't have the support around us, then we can again we end up fighting for our own inadequacies. We end up fighting for our own, I guess, insecurities, our own self-limiting beliefs, because it's tied to our our identity of
Mhm.
ourselves. And so we want to be right about how we can screw up.
For
You know,
sure. Yeah.
we can get into this idea that like, see, I knew if I brought this up to you, you would respond in that way. It's like, well, we end up doing that because we want to be right about our own self-limiting beliefs or our own self-sabotage, because again, it's familiar. And just because it's familiar doesn't mean that it's healthy. And so, um, yeah,
So does that, is it a constant work for everybody? Do I mean, is it okay, if somebody relapses and they fall off, or they fall off track and they, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. I just ruined everything. Is it harder for them to get back on track at that point? Is it possible for them to get back on track at that point? Is it more of a mental block that they have to get through because they're reverting back to those old stories?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, it would be, and sorry, and what's the question? Is it harder for them to get back on track after a relapse?
Yeah, so if they fall off and, say they've been sober for 4 years and they go out with friends or whatever and have a drink, and it kind of messes up the whole track record. For a lot of people, they count down or they count up to those days that they've been clean and sober. And to give in to the temptation makes a lot of them feel like they just blew it and ruined everything. So because I blew it and ruined everything by that one drink, that's my free ticket to continue on and go back down that path of destruction. So does that make it harder to recover at that point?
It can, it depends on the perspective of that, like if you were talking about, getting on, being strict with a diet, for example, and if you were, you end up folding and going to the cupboard and grabbing a cookie,
Yeah,
does that mean then that it's all over with? No, it just means that, okay, well then just start again right away. It doesn't mean that it's all for nothing. But again, I think again, it's the stories and the mindset of how we're approaching it.
mm-hmm.
If the goal is just to tick off those numbers, those months or those years of sobriety, or then yeah, it's gonna be a setback. Um, but then it's like, okay, well then, understanding your why are you choosing to or contemplating getting back into being sober again?
Yeah.
Um,
Is
and
this something
understand
somebody can do on their own, or do you need somebody to guide you through this process?
it depends on the person for sure. I think it definitely is helpful when you have support for sure. Um, I don't have a lot of personal experience when it comes to addictions. However, I do know that um, it's imperative to, in order to, like, say for instance, to get in shape, it's an accountability buddy, right? It helps you go to the gym because you know
Yeah.
that someone else is dependent on you to be there or is waiting for you to be there. And so then it's just an accountability. Um, and and again, I think, everyone uses this word of mindset. And mindset is essentially, for me, it's just the story that we are telling ourselves. And so if we're telling ourselves that we're capable of doing it, then I think that is truly, it's going to be helpful. If we can do it on our own, then I think then I'm not necessarily going to recommend it for across the board, but I think it could be helpful for sure. Absolutely.
Mhm. I mean, it's a scary thing for anybody, addiction or not,
Yeah.
to have to take that first step, and it can seem so overwhelming if it is not something that you're accustomed to, especially when you need to make such a significant change, even if it's small, to change the entire course of your life. So what about for somebody that is like maybe lost everything? They've lost their job, they've lost their friendships or whatever kind of relationships they have. Maybe they've been through a divorce and they feel like there's just nothing out there to save them or to help them. What is the very first step besides calling somebody to help them? um, a mentor or a coach, what is one thing they can do as the first step of getting out of this?
Yeah. I think I'm a big proponent of journaling. I think it definitely helps. So for me, journaling can help with, again, creating that distance. So for example, like we have whatever is getting ourselves in that rut,
Mm-hmm.
that story that's on loop, it can be almost like this, where like the story is just like so in your face that you can't have the distance to see it. And so when you write something down, you are able to help create at some distance. It again, you become the for a moment there, you can become the observer rather than the constant participant in that. And then again, be aware of those words that we're casting upon ourselves by understanding that those words truly do dictate our posture, our imagination, our breath, and our thoughts and our feelings. And so we're also utilizing like three abilities with our brain when we're writing, like pen to paper, not necessarily typing. I think there's a difference between typing it out to writing. So pen to paper, you can just do stream of consciousness. Don't worry about punctuation, nothing. Just kind of get it out. Just get it out on paper. And then you can also then almost utilize it almost like looking at it like an incident report, whatever that event is, or the the situation that you're processing, um, which is not necessarily journaling, but you're just telling it as is. It's like an incident report. This is what happened. And then you're able to not only be able to like use like kinesthetics, like actual physically write it out, but then you're also using your your vision, your visual acuity to be able to look at it. You're also telling yourself the story out loud as you're writing it.
Mhm.
And so it can kind of create a framework. It can create some boundaries instead of just this abstract thing that is just stuck here. It can be like, oh, wait a second. And then we can get to the idea of, well, is this fact or fiction? Is this real or is this false? And then eventually go from there. Um, I would say that would be potentially something that they could do on their own for sure. And I think it's really important. Again, I want to emphasize it's pen to paper. Um,
Yeah, we take that for granted because it's so simple, it's so easy, we all have access to it, and it seems almost too elementary to have any kind of effect. So I know a lot of people, as soon as they hear the word journaling, they're like, you want me to do what? Oh, that's not going to do anything for me. But it's really important to understand that it's activating so many other parts of the brain that otherwise wouldn't be activated
yeah,
that can that can take that first step and thrust us into the next second step and third step and then really get the ball moving. So something it's really powerful to be able to do something like that on your own.
absolutely. I'll throw in another couple of bonuses too. Just nature, get out in nature, look like just go for a walk. And then, and there's so much studies on circadian rhythm as well.
Mhm.
If you're able to get outside, get grounded, it doesn't necessarily, I live in Arizona, which I'm, fortunate, like it's sunny, a lot of the time. But even when it's not sunny out, it's okay to get outside and allow sunlight and the sunlight to actually penetrate your eyes. So take off your glasses, no sunglasses, allow the UV rays to get in, especially waking up with sunrise or close to, and then taking some of those light breaks throughout the day. If you're in the office or if you're working from home, just get outside, and then in the evening allow those warm golden orange hues to
Mhm.
again set that circadian rhythm. we're animals essentially. We need to kind of get in touch with nature. We can't outrun it. So get in tune with it. And there's literally just grounding, right? The earth is negatively charged. And so, when we're wearing all these synthetic materials of, you know, gym shorts or leggings or whatnot, it's all plastic. And so it's all kind of giving off this positive charge that's also deregulating our nervous system. And so if we can get into the, barefoot into the ground with the sunlight, it can help restore some of that just the, it's free as well. It's natural. And so
Yeah.
that can definitely be helpful too. And it's also, yeah, and a lot of these things can be challenging because it's so attainable, and yet we also want that quick fix of that, that diet pill, or that, quick fix of, this outside of ourselves. Everything is like external. It's like it has to be something out there, when really, again, it can be achieved by just the simplicity. And that's where the genius is in its simplicity.
So even if you fall off track, that just to recap, no matter what has happened, no matter where you're at, no matter who you are and what you have going on, if you fall off track, that's okay. You have to get back on. And the easiest ways and the like free ways to do that are so very simple, and we have to stop with the avoidance of simplicity because it seems like it's too easy, it's not going to work. So getting out in nature, rising and falling with the sun and the moon. If you get up in the morning, have that morning exposure, get out your pen and your paper, do a little brain dump, get it all out, have that exposure throughout the day, go for a walk, get your body moving, and write down your thoughts. Those are the easiest ways to get back on track. And it doesn't have to be, well, oh my gosh, I got to get back into treatment. That could be something that you do further along down the line or start working towards. But what you can do right now are just those three things that could be your very next step towards active recovery.